Yes, very much a pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking me to come and do a session here. I very much look forward to this. I do have to apologize, though, because the visuals are always so much more wonderful than just having someone talk to you. But I do have some books to share that I am going to leave out also so that you can take a better look at them. I had intended to put together a PowerPoint presentation because I know that's always something that keeps your attention more, to have something to look at. But I've had a serious situation in my family with a close family member who has Alzheimer's, and I have been spending almost the last couple of years between travels when I could get away taking care of him. And 2 weeks ago he went to live in a memory care home, so it's a little easier, but I just did not have a chance to put together the PowerPoint presentation, so forgive me. And you've been sitting a long time, so I hope my talk will be lively enough that I can keep you awake for at least a few more minutes. And Timmy, so that I don't run over my time, would you kind of give me a sign when I have 10 minutes left to go, because I do want to get to the books and I don't want to shortchange those. I've been very fortunate, I think, in my life because I have always loved books. I've always been surrounded with books. I was fortunate that I was in a family where we had books, and so from a very young age I was exposed to the many good books, and I became an avid reader. And that was right up through high school. I remember I lived in the country and I had to ride a bus to school. And so even in high school, I would take a book with me and read. So they've always been in my life. And then when I went away to college and decided I was going to the university, decided I was going to be a teacher, I had the wonderful experience of taking some children's literature classes from wonderful people who really turned me on even more to what's out there and what we can use with children if we're fortunate enough to be teachers or librarians or parents. And so that was very much important in my life. And so because of that, when I became a classroom teacher, I knew that I wanted every day to use children's books with the children, to read to them, to expose them to books, to talk about those books, to have many activities around children's books. And then later I became a librarian, where I really had even more opportunities to expose children because I was in a school district and had opportunities to go to many schools within that district, and later at the county office level where I had many opportunities to go out to many schools and share books with children. I was always amazed too, and I had a little bit fearful, I remember at first, when I was asked to go out and do book talks for junior high and high school students. But you know, it's amazing. It's amazing how you can turn older children, older young adults onto books by just getting into them and exposing them. So I've had wonderful opportunities, and then at the university level and sharing my experiences with classroom teachers and librarians when I taught classes at that level. So it's been wonderful. When I thought about what I wanted to talk to about today and to share with you today, and the topic, seeing beyond through picture books, I decided one of the things that I wanted to do was to talk about the influence of books on refugee children that so many of us are experiencing now in our countries. You know, they exist in all worlds today. They are in our schools, in our communities. Their experiences do not often reflect the children that they find in those schools and communities when they come. But as teachers and librarians and parents, we need to do what we can to help these children find peace with what they've experienced. And at the same time, I think we need to influence the understanding of those children who have not had this refugee experience. And for this paper then, I want to look at two areas of the world where I think schools are particularly impacted by child refugees at this point in time, and that would be Europe and North America. So I want to kind of set the background, because in preparing for this paper, I thought I'd like to go in and see just how much we are impacted by these refugees, and especially the children that we have coming to us. Child refugees numbers have soared according to the new UNICEF report. Children represent a disproportionate fraction of the world's refugees. They made up less than 1/3 of the global population, but they accounted for 51% of the world's refugees in 2015. The number has grown almost 80% in just 5 years. Today, 1 in every 200 children in the world is a refugee. It almost brings me to tears, to tell you the truth. And nearly 1 in 3 children are living outside the country of their birth. Now, Europe, I know many child refugees have come to Europe in recent years. And among the 1.3 million people who have sought asylum in Europe in 2015, nearly 100,000 were not just children, but unaccompanied children. Most were from Afghanistan and Syria, and 13% were younger than 14 years of age. Unaccompanied minors in Europe now represent the greatest migration of children since the Second World War. Well, what about North America? The number of unaccompanied minors attempting to enter the United States, most of them from Central America, has also dramatically increased in recent years. Almost 26,000 unaccompanied children have been apprehended at the U.S. border in the first 6 months of 2016, according to UNICEF. Most of these minors do not have access to lawyers, and about 40% are sent back to their countries. I'm very sorry to say. I really believe that the United States is not doing what it should do to open its doors to these children that so desperately need to come. This fate can be a death sentence as many flee their countries to avoid being recruited and targeted by gangs. So how does this impact our schools? With so many news stories about families fleeing Syria and other war-torn places, our children may be asking questions about these heartbreaking situations. So I think it's important to protect our children from traumatizing images and information. I need 6 hands here. Sorry. And we also want to encourage empathy for those who are struggling and to empower our children to know that they can make a difference. Children's books can provide an important avenue for building this understanding. On the other hand, we may have refugee children in our community and in our schools who need to heal from their experiences. Child refugees are 5 times more likely to be out of school than non-refugee children. Even those in school are likely to suffer discrimination, including unfair treatment and bullying. Many are the prey of human trafficking groups. Many live on the streets, sleeping on sidewalks and in traffic medians. Many come to schools both in Europe and the US after experiencing the murder of family members, war, starvation, and the loss of home. Well, what about the power of books and reading, especially for these children? Real life calls for books that provide information, comfort, and models for coping with life's difficult times, I believe. Children's books can provide an avenue for healing. And any of us who are classroom teachers and librarians and even parents know this to be true. They can have a powerful impact on a child's life. Books can offer readers of all ages the opportunity to find solutions through the characters and conflicts within the story, and thus within themselves. They can provide a window, and several of you have already talked about this who've done presentations already this morning, that they can provide a window and a mirror to life. In books, children can experience a window to the outside world, looking out at experiences of other children different from their own experiences. Books can also provide an important mirror to look inward and reflect on experiences in which characters in the books mirror their own experiences and how the characters are able to cope with and learn from these experiences. Through books, a child can see how others have confronted and solved similar problems, have encountered anxieties, frustrations, hope, and disappointments, and applied these insights to real-life situations with the support of the helping person to gain understanding of alternative solutions to their problems. Books can be an excellent resource in a whole class setting, or can be used with individual children or in a small group setting in the classroom or library. They are also excellent resources for parents requesting assistance during hardships. Parents and educators cannot always take away the pain and anguish a child feels when dealing with a crisis, but we can provide a resource for healing and coping through books and reading. Reading aloud to children, as well as assigned and shared reading of stories, has the effect of not only providing information, but also stimulating discussion about what is troubling the young people, airing new values and attitudes, and allowing the group to realize that others have similar problems and the realistic means of solving them. Appropriate stories also offer the young reader a basis for moral judgment that helps them to tell the difference between right and wrong. They provide models for identification. Books about refugees and immigrants are universal. They depict the experiences of all races, cultures, and creeds, and can promote positive attitudes in readers, eliminating common prejudices and stereotypes. As parents and educators, we have a responsibility to lay the foundation for tolerance and acceptance in hopes of eradicating discrimination. These traumatized children often feel that they have lost their ability to feel, and they especially need to hear, to tell, and to write stories so that they may think about what they feel. Reading, telling, and writing stories are extremely useful tools for traumatized children. They help them to release emotions, provide possible solutions to their own problems, encourage them to talk about their own problems, allow them to witness cultures different from their own, and provide them with other interests to follow and give them grounds for self-reflection. As a teacher or parent, your willingness to discuss their feelings and experiences with them reassures them that we can talk about anything and that it's okay to share their thoughts and emotions. But it's also important that a selected text presents complex emotions, thoughts, character development, morals about the dilemmas of being human under great grief, and always includes an element of hope, or it should. It should be literary in the sense that the book itself, as a structure and a work of art, moves us with the quality with which it is composed and written. In itself, a courageous and moral act that reinforces a sense of life humanely lived. The book should be about universal values and fairness and moral choices, a belief in freedom and values of each individual, and the ability of characters who live by these values to survive. The selected text needs to encourage the stories the young traumatized person wants to tell, but bear in mind that many of these young people find self-expression too frightening, or their cultural mores do not encourage this form of dealing with trauma. The story in each book should encourage a sense of the possibility of survival in new circumstances, empowering and hope despite the difficult odds they face. It is also important that they realize the telling of their stories is purely for them or for those in similar situations, and to reassure them that no one is going to judge, ignore, or deride the writing they do from these books. So I guess my theme and my message today, which I'm sure you all know anyway, is that it is so important, I think, that we use these kinds of books today with not only those children that are coming to us as refugee children, but even as important, that we use these books with the children that are in the countries, in the classrooms, in the homes where these children are coming, so that our children more understand what it's like to be one of these children, and can take them in and love them and care for them as friends. I have to say, I don't think probably there's any time in my lifetime, at least, and I'm pretty old now, but there's no more time in my lifetime that I think these kinds of books are needed even more in the United States and right now with what's going on there. And it's so important, I think, to change the minds and the intellect of children that perhaps are coming from homes where they don't have this understanding or where they're anti-immigrant. So for me, it is so important. Well, in preparing for this, this presentation, and knowing that I had only a certain limited amount of time, I thought it would be interesting to go to, yeah, it would be wonderful. I wanted to go to some, I wanted to look and see what some experts in the United States had selected on their list of perhaps the 10 or 20 most important books that they felt that had been published in the last few years about refugee children. And so I found quite a few, but I brought 9 with me, and especially because I didn't have a PowerPoint presentation to show you these, I wanted to bring them in person. So these are the books I want to talk about, and of course I'm not sure that you would have access to these books in your libraries here or in the diverse countries from which you come in this audience. But these books have all been published. Of course, they're in English, but they've all, many of them were published in Canada, a few in the United States, and I think one that I brought with me was published in the United Kingdom. But this particular book, Where Will I Live, by Rosemary McCartney, is a stunning photo essay which takes a look at the thousands of children around the world who have been forced to flee war, terror, hunger, and natural disasters. Young refugees on the move with very little left except questions. It's hard to imagine, but the images here will help unaffected children understand that not only what this must feel like, but also how very lucky they are to have not had this experience. The final message in this book is that children, even with uncertain futures, are resilient and can face uncertainty with optimism. With images from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, this particular author, illustrator, selected these pictures and then wove it into a kind of a story about what these children have faced along the way, but the hope that they can find in a new home. So I think it's a very significant book, and the illustrations are heart-rending, but in a way very necessary and beautiful. So the second one that I want to talk a little bit about is a book called The Journey, and it's by Francesca Sana, Flying Eye Books, published in 2016. I don't know, you may know this one, but it's based on her own interactions with people who were forced to seek a new home and told from the perspective of a young child. Francesca Sana has created a beautiful and sensitive book that is full of significance for our time. And through her story, and quite a simple story actually, and her illustrations, she takes you from a family, I believe it's in Syria, who are forced to leave the country, and it shows their whole journey from Syria through across on a boat, I think through Turkey first, and then on a boat and landing in Greece, and then coming up, and they finally end up somewhere in Europe. But it's told from the standpoint especially of the mother and the children in this story and what they face along the way. And I think this would be, do any of you allow your children, your students to turn books into reader's theater, or you do reader's theater for them? I think this is a wonderful way. I found this to be a wonderful way to get children interested in a particular book, because you can do it, turn it into a reader's theater where the children are reading some of the parts. There may be narrators to do some of the narration. In fact, I turned this book into a reader's theater script. I don't know if you've received it, and I didn't have time to make copies or enough luggage to bring that many copies. But this story in particular, I think, would make a really good reader's theater script for children and would help them to understand And then when they do this, they can practice it and they can do it for other children in the school with illustrations that could be shown that I wish you could see. But I will leave the book and hopefully you'll take a look at it. The third one that I want to share is really, I think, a fascinating, unique book, and it's called Stepping Stones. The title is for a purpose. A Stepping Stones, A Refugee's Family's Journey. This book was written by Marguerite Reurs, I hope I pronounced her name correctly, with artwork by Nizar Ali Badr. And it's based on a family and a story of Rama, a young man, who are forced to leave behind everything they know and love with only what they can carry on their backs. Rama's family sets out to find refuge in Europe. And the nice thing about this book is it's both in Arabic. It's one of those wonderful bilingual books. So the text is in Arabic and in English. Which I think makes it very nice for refugee children that are coming, because so many of them do speak Arabic and therefore they can understand the book even if they don't really understand English. But I think the formation or the development of this book is kind of an interesting story, because she had seen this illustrator, Marguerite Reurs had seen this illustrator's work and realized that all of his artwork he does in stones that he picks up in various places. So he puts all these stones together to create this artwork, and she saw some of his work and she thought, I think this would make a wonderful story that could be used about refugee children using his artwork. And so after many months of trying to get in touch with him, she finally was able to do so. And he thought that, yes, this would be a wonderful project. And so many of the illustrations in the books are perhaps illustrations that he had before, but many were created anew for this book. And one of the things I found fascinating too is that can you imagine the hours it would take to put together stones that would create the illustrations, even for one page? And to make these figures that are so wonderful in the book, that he doesn't even keep them. He takes pictures of them or artwork of them, and then he may use those same stones to do another picture. So it's just amazing to me, but it's a beautiful story, and I think a very important one if you're looking for books about refugee children. Now, this one is kind of cute too, and it's based on a real story. Illustrations totally different from the Stepping Stones book, but it is Lost and Found Cat, the true story of Kunkush's incredible journey. Are any of you familiar with this one? Well, this is a story about a family in Iraq. It's based on a true story, actually. The author read this story and decided it would make a good book based on a true story. But it's about a family in Iraq who has to leave Mosul, and they cannot bear to leave without taking their family cat, Kunkush, with them. So they carry him hundreds of miles over mountains, through forests, across the sea, and they have to carry him, the children hide him all along the way, hope that the cat won't meow, so they're given away, because they know that either, if the cat is found out, they will either have to pay a much higher price to go, or that the cat will be left behind somewhere. Well, guess what? Something happens. When they get across the sea, and they have a very rocky boat trip across the sea, but the cat manages to make it too, they get to the other side, and the cat, when they land, the lid of the carry crate has been left ajar, and the cat gets out in Greece and gets lost. Well, the family search and search and search and search for this cat, and can't find it, and they finally have to leave. And the plight of the family was written up in a local paper, and some people who saw this decided that they were going to try to continue to look for the cat. Well, to make a long story short, the cat is found. The cat goes to Germany to be, because they thought this might be where the refugee family went. And so it goes to Germany, but then they discover that the family has actually relocated in Norway. And finally the cat is reunited with its family. After being lost in Greece, it finally is reunited with its family. And of course, any of you who have pets, I have 2 dogs at home. And I don't know what I would do if I lost either one of them, but it is really a heartwarming story, and I think a story that children would really take to in thinking about their own experiences, perhaps even. So that's a wonderful book. The next one, am I running out of time? I hope. I'm trying to. I am. I'll make this really fast. Is a book called My Beautiful Birds by Suzanne Del Riso. This is about a Syrian boy whose family are forced to leave all they hold dear as they flee their home for the safety of a refugee camp. Sammy worries about the fate of the pet pigeons he's left behind. In this book, Sammy has his pet pigeons, and of course when they have to leave their home, they can't take the pigeons with them. So he lets them free. But when they finally get to the refugee camp, he never forgets about his pet pigeons and how much these have meant to him. And he's always thinking about them and wishing and seeing them in the clouds in the sky. And at one point in time, he's out in the refugee camp, and these other birds that are not his pigeons, but several birds come and light on his arm. And so he feels again that he has some hope and some connection to the pet pigeons that he's had to leave behind. It's a beautiful story, and she uses clay work to do her illustrations. I think the nice thing too about the selection of books is that the medium that the different illustrators use are quite different from book to book to book. Okay, do we have time for another or no? No? I will skip the last 2 on the list, but I do want to point out, because those were all about refugee children in Europe, and these 2 books I think are very significant, have been published in Canada actually by Groundwood Press. One called 2 White Rabbits. It's about a father and his daughter who travel north on a train to get to the U.S. border. And this one, which was published just this last year, Somos como las nubes, We Are Like the Clouds, is a book. I don't know if any of you were in Bologna, but during the Bologna Book Fair, we had an auction of the paintings from this book in order to raise money for Children in Crisis, VIDÍŠ Children in Crisis Fund. And the poems and the illustrations in this book, this is a must to share with children. I can only hope it'll be, translated into other languages. I just want to share, because of the We Are the Clouds, I'm going to have to hold this one because I want to share. Sorry about this. But I think the poems in this book are wonderful, as well as the illustrations. I hope you'll take a look at this when I leave it out for you to see. We are like the clouds, elephants, horses, cows, pigs, flowers, whales, parakeets. We are like the clouds. Pupupas, tamales, popcorn balls, cotton candy. We are like the clouds. Cornfields in bloom, pumpkins and watermelons, parrots and kites, and the huge San Salvador volcano. One I want to share with you real quickly, because this is the picture that I bid on and that I actually won, and that I have framed and is hanging in my house. I love this picture because I love dogs, and this black and white dog in this picture is like one of my dogs at home, who is black and white. Chacho is his name. But this is a poem happens to be about a young boy who is seeing his friend off on a bus to go north to the border, and how his friend, well, you'll see the gist of it. It's called iPod. iPod left today for Guatemala. He told me, if I can, I will go to Mexico. If I can, to Arizona, if I can to Washington, where my mother is living. iPod, my good friend, I wish you a safe trip. I will take care of your dog, of your iPod not so much, since you had to sell it to buy your bus ticket. So it's just, there's so many beautiful poems, and it goes from the children as they are in their own country. It's okay, to their trip with wonderful, well, I'm not sure they're wonderful illustrations. They're wonderful illustrations in terms of the illustrator, but the subject matter is kind of heart-rending. But there's also some poems at the very end about the children finally arriving and what their lives are like there. So I really highly recommend this book. I also did a sheet of activities that could be used in the classroom or in the library, recommended activities that you can do with children. I've never been one to think you should beat a book to death, you know, but I think discussions about books is very important in the classroom. I think art work emanating, having children write their own stories, a lot of these things can be very effective in really getting into the book and letting the children enjoy the book. So I'm sorry that I took so much of time, but it's been a pleasure to be here, and I continue to share those wonderful books with your kids. It's so important. Thank you.